I'm grateful for the life I'm living!
25 criminal episodes, 7 levels. I've put together an iceberg of some of the most shocking crimes committed in Bikini Bottom. We'll start with some of the more expected crimes, but the deeper we get, the more disturbing things will become. Let's start at the tip of the iceberg. Level 1. Jellyfishing. The episode Jellyfishing begins with SpongeBob and Patrick preparing for their favorite hobby, jellyfishing, and kind of feeling like they want a friend to help them out. Naturally, they decide to approach the one person who would never do this, Squidward, who would rather go bicycling. His sarcastic response about being the best day ever should have been a clear signal to leave him alone, but hey, SpongeBob and Patrick aren't the kind of guys who get subtlety. While he's biking, a jellyfish flies into Squidward's mouth, causing him to lose control and crash down a cliff in an enormous, extremely violent accident that leaves him wheelchair-bound and wrapped in full-body bandages, requiring extensive medical care. Rather than respecting his recovery period, SpongeBob and Patrick immediately decide he needs a best day ever jellyfishing trip, completely disregarding his medical condition. Because who cares about health? But here's where the crimes begin. At Squidward's house, Patrick attempts to feed him soup by repeatedly blowing hot liquid into his bandaged face, making his injuries worse, no doubt. When SpongeBob suggests music instead, he takes Squidward's clarinet and performs unsanitary acts to moisten his lips before playing, showing complete disregard for hygiene around an injured person. But then at Jellyfish Fields, Patrick tries to place a jellyfishing net in Squidward's cast-covered hand. When the net repeatedly falls due to Squidward's inability to grip it properly, Patrick becomes increasingly aggressive, ultimately jamming the net handle directly through Squidward's palm, creating a hole in his cast and causing him to scream in pain. That's assault. Squidward gets stung by a jellyfish, seeks revenge, and ends up provoking a queen jellyfish that delivers a massive attack on his injured body, leaving him requiring life support. The next day, SpongeBob and Patrick return to his house, now bearing their own bandages from jellyfish stings, yet they still don't grasp the connection between their actions and the escalating harm. They present Squidward with the very jellyfish that caused his injuries, as if offering a trophy for his suffering. When the queen jellyfish discovers and attacks Squidward one final time, destroying his life support equipment, he can only manage a weak ow. Poor dude. Nightlight. In Nightlight, SpongeBob reads a scary book before bed and develops an immediate, paralyzing fear of darkness. By the next morning, he's having violent screaming fits whenever he blinks, creating a workplace safety hazard that forces Mr. Krabs to send him home. But on the way, SpongeBob stops off at Bargain Mart, where he purchases every available nightlight, clearing the store's entire inventory before returning home to begin an obsessive installation process. 1 light becomes 10, 10 becomes 50, and soon every surface is literally glowing. When Gary points out that darkness still exists inside SpongeBob's body, he commits what could maybe be classified as self-harm by shoving flashlights directly into his eye sockets. The light pollution reaches criminal levels when Patrick arrives, mistaking the overwhelmingly bright house for a party. SpongeBob immediately corrupts Patrick, convincing him that darkness poses mortal danger. Patrick responds by dragging his rock through SpongeBob's wall, creating massive structural damage as they escalate their operation, hauling a full-sized lighthouse onto residential property without permits or safety considerations. This reckless action creates a domino effect. The concentrated light beams reflect off multiple surfaces in Squidward's home, creating a laser that burns his sleeping mask and eyes and presumably blinds him. So just in terms of crimes, property damage and bodily harm against an innocent neighbor. But the lighthouse also functions as an emergency signal, fraudulently summoning Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy to respond to a non-existent crisis. Now, it's not all bad. The light draws the Moth, a dangerous criminal whom Mermaid Man has hunted for 57 years. When SpongeBob traps the villain inside the lighthouse, the Moth demonstrates his power by lifting both the lighthouse and SpongeBob's entire house into the air before flying away. SpongeBob's misguided vigilante attempt results in the complete destruction of his property and potentially unleashes the Moth upon Bikini Bottom. All this because of a scary book. Good Neighbors. Good Neighbors begins with SpongeBob using his foghorn alarm to wake the entire neighborhood before he infiltrates Squidward's house uninvited on a Sunday morning. When Squidward kicks him out, SpongeBob immediately begins stalking Squidward's property, monitoring his Sunday activities. Because they apparently have nothing better to do than harass Squidward, SpongeBob and Patrick form their so-called Good Neighbors Lodge and forcibly inaugurate Squidward as president without his consent. They storm back into his house, performing what they call a secret ritual while Squidward is trying to relax. That's trespassing and intimidation tactics. Oh, and a whole lot of property damage. Patrick converts SpongeBob into a human paint sprayer, coating neighborhood trees with polka dots and accidentally striking an elderly cyclist with a paint can. But the real destruction comes when they blind Squidward with paint, causing him to run into traffic, leading the passing motorists to mistake his paint-covered face for a medical emergency. While Squidward is being held against his will at the hospital, SpongeBob and Patrick commit identity fraud. They impersonate Squidward to his scheduled massage therapist, stealing his paid appointment and using his services without authorization. When Squidward returns home, his hour is already up. Squidward understandably installs a security system to protect himself from further invasion, but SpongeBob and Patrick return with a peace offering, an apology cake. When the security system correctly identifies no threat from the cake, Squidward attacks the machine in frustration, causing it to zap Squidward with a laser. In the chaos, SpongeBob accidentally launches the cake into the security system, causing it to malfunction, transforming into a giant robot, physically ejecting Squidward from his own property, and beginning a rampage through Bikini Bottom that sees endless carnage, destruction, and terror. When authorities arrive, they charge Squidward with all damages. The court sentences him to community service every Sunday for the rest of his life, despite the fact that SpongeBob and Patrick's repeated criminal trespassing and harassment directly caused the entire incident. There's really no justice in Bikini Bottom. Level 2. No Free Rides. No Free Rides opens with SpongeBob failing his driving test spectacularly, scoring just 6 points out of the required 600. Staring at the wreckage of another destroyed boatmobile, Mrs. Puff knows she faces another year of this chaos, but something snaps inside her mind. She decides to commit educational fraud on a scale that is unthinkable. Mrs. Puff fabricates an extra credit assignment so transparently fake it borders on insulting, a 10-word essay about boating school. She even provides 7 of the words herself. When SpongeBob's pencil keeps breaking and his paper becomes illegible, she doesn't care. She passes him anyway, handing over a driver's license she already had prepared. That's deliberate document fraud, putting a dangerous driver on the roads with falsified credentials. Her problem escalates when she discovers SpongeBob received a new boat as a gift. The moment SpongeBob leaves with his fraudulent license, Mrs. Puff realizes what she's done. She imagines news reports blaming her for the inevitable destruction, muttering about having to move to a new city, start a new boating school with a new name. No, not again. This isn't her first time running from the consequences of licensing fraud. She's a career criminal. Unable to face the carnage her fraudulent license will enable, Mrs. Puff decides theft is her only option. She dons a ski mask and attempts to steal the vehicle, not knowing SpongeBob sleeps inside. When he awakens and confronts the masked thief, she tries to shake him loose by driving through increasingly dangerous obstacles. This whole sequence reveals Mrs. Puff's desperation and complete disregard for public safety. She drags SpongeBob through giant clams and cheese graters, crashes through educational television broadcasts, all while he clings to the bumper. Police officials witness the whole scene, but only intervene when the stolen boat crashes directly into their car. When SpongeBob unmasks the thief, Mrs. Puff is arrested for Grand Theft Auto, reckless driving, and endangering public safety. The episode ends with her behind bars where, frankly, she belongs after committing multiple felonies in a single night. Crabborg. In Crabborg, SpongeBob's late-night viewing of Night of the Robot plants paranoid seeds in his head, causing him to see robotic behavior everywhere he looks. His mother, Uncle Sherm, even Gary, all transformed into mechanical threats in his mind.
What if Mom is a robot? What if Uncle Sherm is a robot? What if Gary is a robot?
But these suspicions crystallize around one target, Mr. Krabs. SpongeBob watches through the office window as Mr. Krabs declares he's recharged while talking to his radio. Strange dancing follows, then robotic beeping sounds during phone calls. When salt gets in Crab's eyes, he emerges screaming with metal pinchers and batteries visible in his pocket. The coincidences pile up in his mind. They're undeniable because of how they match perfectly with what they're observing. Suddenly, Squidward, initially skeptical, becomes a true believer. Obviously, they tie up Mr. Krabs in his own office, demanding to know where they've hidden the real boss. But when this direct questioning fails, they escalate to a more destructive, violent method: property destruction. They destroy his possessions to extract information. The blender, worth $24.95, gets smashed first, then the $35.50 toaster, then something worth $62.67. Each destroyed item is another attempt to break his resolve through violence and, let's be honest, wasted money. They save the cash register for last, the one Krabs claims he raised from a little calculator. The financial toll reaches $120.12 in documented damage, a fortune for Krabs. But the real cost comes when Krabs breaks down crying over his destroyed register, claiming he loved it like family. His tears and expressions of love directly contradict the movie's rules about robotic limitations. They realize their mistake only when Squidward asks how the film ended, revealing it was all imagination. SpongeBob flees immediately, leaving his partner to face the consequences alone. Nice. Okay, so we don't have robotic crabs either, but we do have more great SpongeBob videos coming. All you have to do is hit subscribe. Let's move to the next level. Level 3. Pranks-a-Lot. Pranks-a-Lot begins with SpongeBob and Patrick walking into the Palace of Pranks with $1 and a dangerous idea brewing. Frank the shop owner sells them an invisible spray that supposedly stains clothes, warning them to be careful with it. That warning becomes the first domino in a chain of escalating criminal behavior that will terrorize an entire community. They strip naked to avoid staining their clothes, then immediately begin fighting over who gets to use the spray first, eventually accidentally spraying each other until they're completely invisible. Of course, a bus driver spots two naked figures fighting in public, but this public indecency violation is just the beginning. When they ask a stranger for the time, he can't see them, assuming they're ghosts. Instead of clarifying the misunderstanding, SpongeBob hatches what he calls the ultimate prank. They'll pretend to be supernatural entities to frighten everyone in town.
If that guy thought we were ghosts, we could haunt everybody in Bikini Bottom. Oh, it's the ultimate prank.
They start at Sandy's house, moving her belongings around and displaying portraits of Patrick on her walls. This constitutes breaking and entering, vandalism, and psychological harassment so severe that Sandy flees to Texas in horror. They move on to Mrs. Puff's residence, stealing her cake right out of her hands, blatant theft. At Squidward's home, they commit more breaking and entering, using his own paintbrush to deface his face with a mustache. The violation of his personal space and property destruction is another escalation in their home invasions. Their crime spree spreads across Bikini Bottom as they terrorize random citizens, creating widespread panic. Newspapers report that the entire town lives in fear except for one person, Mr. Krabs. Well, they have to change that. At the Krusty Krab, they trap Mr. Krabs inside by gluing all the doors shut. They replace windows with rubber, making escape impossible. They clog every toilet, eliminating even the most basic facilities. Unlawful imprisonment, vandalism, and destruction of property. Tick, tick, tick. The final act involves threatening to destroy Mr. Krabs' money by burning it. Only when he throws water at the threatening flames does the spray wash off, revealing their true identities. Mr. Krabs then exposes their naked bodies to the entire town as punishment, which, let's be real, is justified. SquidBob Tentacle Pants. In SquidBob Tentacle Pants, Sandy Cheeks operates an unlicensed medical laboratory in her tree dome, conducting dangerous experiments on living beings without proper oversight or consent. Her latest creation, a matter transportation device, becomes trouble when SpongeBob arrives seeking a quick ride to work. The machine malfunctions during transport, transforming these two sentient beings into a single grotesque entity against their will. The resulting creature, dubbed SquidBob Tentacle Pants, represents an insane violation of bodily autonomy. SpongeBob's yellow flesh is 90% of the abomination, while Squidward retains only his head, one arm, and a leg, essentially trapped as a passenger in someone else's body. Which might actually be worse. The fusion forces them to share basic biological functions, whether they want to or not, creating situations that would constitute serious legal violations. At the Krusty Krab, the two-headed creature tries to work but cannot perform basic tasks, causing workplace disruption that forces Mr. Krabs to ban them. Suddenly, their condition makes them unemployable, but the real crimes are just beginning. Sandy's response to her victim's pleas reveals the extent of her reckless endangerment. She admits her molecular separator won't be ready for days, essentially holding them prisoner in one body. When Squidward's clarinet recital arrives, Sandy's delays force the creature onto a public stage where audiences witness the disturbing spectacle themselves in a twisted entertainment scenario that exploits them. When she finally separates them and the audience rejects the non-freakish Squidward, he immediately reverses the process using her unsecured equipment, accidentally fusing dozens of townspeople into one massive entity. It's obvious that her victims suffer major long-term trauma, but will Sandy face any punishment? Unlikely. Keep Bikini Bottom Beautiful. In Keep Bikini Bottom Beautiful, Squidward starts his day in rare good spirits, walking through town with genuine happiness. But as always, when Squidward is happy, the universe has other plans. He steps in discarded chewing gum, struggles to remove it from his foot, and finally throws it aside in frustration. Officer John appears immediately, as if he's been waiting for this exact moment, accusing Squidward of littering despite his protests that the gum wasn't his. Community service becomes his punishment, a horrible fate for Squidward. The sentence forces Squidward into trash collection at the local park, where people begin dumping their refuse directly onto him, treating him like a walking garbage receptacle. When his rival Squilliam appears, bragging about cleaning the entire city in a week and earning a commemorative statue, Squidward declares he'll accomplish the same task in a single day. Oh, and Squilliam blows his nose and deliberately drops the tissue before leaving. Officer John finds the tissue and tickets Squidward for this fresh violation. The trash accumulates beyond manageable levels. Every dumpster and receptacle in the city is full, forcing Squidward to steal a wagon just to handle it. When an elderly resident mistakes his trash pile for collection day and alerts the entire neighborhood, citizens swarm Squidward's location, dumping their household waste onto his growing mountain of refuse. SpongeBob offers to help by absorbing all the trash into his porous body, then transporting the waste somewhere else. You know where this is going. Officer John arrives for the final violation spree, issuing tickets for the garbage house and then ticketing Squidward again when the first citation falls to the ground. SpongeBob creates a garbage statue of Squidward, which emits such potent odors that it melts Squilliam's commemorative statue, and then Officer John tickets everyone present. So ultimately, everyone is kind of responsible. Plankton's Pet. Plankton's Pet opens with Plankton executing what might be his most morally reprehensible scheme yet. He constructs an elaborate baby costume complete with mechanical components and realistic crying sounds, then infiltrates the Krusty Krab during peak hours. The disguise works flawlessly as unsuspecting customers coo over this infant, completely unaware they're witnessing identity fraud. Plankton manipulates the patron's protective instincts, using their natural concern for what appears to be a helpless child to help his theft. By the time he successfully obtains a Krabby Patty, he's committed fraud, theft, and exploitation of public trust. Mr. Krabs sees the lie through security cameras, physically confiscating the disguised Plankton. But the crowd turns hostile, believing they're witnessing an attack on an actual baby. Mr. Krabs forcibly removes Plankton's costume head, revealing the criminal inside, sending Plankton into a spiral that leads to his next catastrophic decision. Karen suggests he get a pet to improve his emotional state, and SpongeBob innocently helps him visit the animal shelter. At the shelter, Plankton settles on Spot, a seemingly harmless amoeba. But obviously, Plankton has ulterior motives, training Spot to steal Krabby Patties, essentially turning an innocent creature into an accomplice. But Spot won't take any of the training on board and vanishes. By the time they manage to find Spot, Plankton and SpongeBob unintentionally unleash some of the more terrifying pets in the pound, until Spot manages to terrify them enough to leave them all alone. Still, it's only a matter of time before that little guy destroys Bikini Bottom. One Krab's Trash. In One Krab's Trash, Mr. Krabs sets up what he calls an antique sale, but it's really just trash sprayed with air freshener. Right from the start, he's running a fraudulent operation, lying to customers about the origins of worthless junk. He tells one buyer that a hole-riddled umbrella belonged to the Queen of Switzerland, knowing full well Switzerland doesn't have a queen. SpongeBob shows up and falls in love with a soda-drinking hat. Krabs sweet-talks him into buying it for $10, agreeing to deduct the remaining payment from SpongeBob's paycheck. What SpongeBob doesn't know is that collectors are about to arrive, offering increasingly astronomical sums for it. The bidding war escalates fast until someone offers $1 million for the hat. Krabs realizes he's been swindled by his own employee, though SpongeBob had no idea what he'd bought. The greed kicks in immediately. Krabs tries to manipulate SpongeBob first. When that fails, he attempts bribery, offering other novelty hats in exchange. SpongeBob refuses every offer, so Krabs escalates to psychological warfare. That night, he draws a crude ghost on paper and dangles it through SpongeBob's bedroom window, claiming to be the ghost of soda drink hats, and warns that the hat is cursed. He fabricates an entire backstory about the hat's previous owner, a dead man named Schmitty Vermenjägermanjensen. The lie is so detailed that SpongeBob believes it completely, burying the hat at what he thinks is Schmitty's grave. But here's where things get truly disturbing. Krabs discovers there actually is a Schmitty Vermenjägermanjensen buried in the cemetery. Most people would see this as a sign to stop, not Krabs. He goes to the graveyard at night with a shovel, willing to defile this grave for money. He digs up the corpse, finds the hat, and physically wrestles it away from the dead body. When Smitty's reanimated corpse confronts him, demanding the hat back, Krabs refuses and fights an army of the undead with a swordfish skeleton. But when he finally returns to sell the hat, he discovers a warehouse full of identical hats has been found, making his prize worthless. The millionaire collectors now chase after SpongeBob's new novelty hat instead, leaving Krabs with nothing but the memory of desecrating a grave for money that never materialized. Level 4. Spy Buddies. Spy Buddy starts with Mr. Krabs suspecting Plankton might be planning something big. He needs SpongeBob to spy on him, so of course SpongeBob and Patrick head to Sandy's lab where she showcases an arsenal of dangerous spy gadgets including jetpacks, laser-equipped pants, and knockout rays. When Sandy refuses to let them use the equipment, Patrick immediately grabs the knockout ray and blasts her unconscious before stealing her entire collection of spy gear while she's incapacitated. The duo starts following Plankton through downtown Bikini Bottom, but their methods quickly turn destructive and illegal. SpongeBob uses a high-powered magnifying glass that concentrates sunlight, literally setting Plankton on fire and sending him screaming through the streets. When Plankton tries to extinguish himself, they deploy their stolen jetpack, which malfunctions, flying them through multiple buildings. The jetpack detaches mid-flight and they crash into the sidewalk with such force that it mangles their bodies. But all that property damage goes completely unaddressed as they move on to their next weapon, which is also destructive. Patrick activates their spy car's self-destruct button purely out of curiosity, detonating the vehicle in what appears to be a residential area. They laugh off the destruction and simply move on to their next target. That night, they break into the chum bucket by cutting through the roof with the military-grade equipment they've stolen and modified. The laser pants are rigged to Patrick's digestive system, meaning every time he needs to use the bathroom, high-powered lasers fire uncontrollably. When this biological trigger activates inside the restaurant, the lasers completely destroy the building. The destruction of the chum bucket forces Plankton to retaliate with a giant blimp, leading to an all-out war between the Krusty Krab and Chum Bucket. Patrick launches himself as a projectile, puncturing the blimp and sending it crashing into the Krusty Krab, obliterating both restaurants. So now both establishments are in ruins, the local economy is devastated, and countless citizens are traumatized by what they've witnessed. And SpongeBob and Patrick, pretty happy. The executive treatment. Patrick walks into the Krusty Krab wanting nothing more than a sandwich, the executive treatment. Instead, he finds a weapon of class discrimination that Mr. Krabs wields with calculated precision. Squidward immediately blocks Patrick's access, declaring the sandwich for executives only, establishing an illegal tier system that violates basic consumer protection laws. They don't stop at discrimination, of course. They need money. $20 for a tie and glasses to access a sandwich that's identical to a regular Krabby Patty, just with SpongeBob wearing different clothes while making it. That's clear-cut fraud, misrepresenting a product to inflate prices based on fake exclusivity. But Patrick, desperate and manipulated, pays the extortion fee, only to be immediately swept away by actual executives before he can consume what he purchased. In broad daylight, too. Patrick tries to explain he's not an executive, but the corporate mob physically drags him to their building, forcing him into unpaid labor. When he attempts to reveal his true identity during a business meeting, someone warns him that impersonating an executive is a crime punishable by imprisonment. That threat silences Patrick, trapping him in a cycle where he must continue the lie or face incarceration. But here's where the system reveals its true brutality. When Patrick finally confesses he's not an executive, they immediately arrest him for the very crime they forced him to commit through their initial kidnapping. The executives who dragged him into their building, who benefited from his unpaid labor, who created the circumstances that required his deception, face no consequences whatsoever, which, to be fair, is very realistic. SpongeBob visits Patrick in prison, discovering his friend has been assigned to run the laundry room. Patrick now performs institutional labor while serving time for a crime that began with Mr. Krabs' discriminatory business practices and the executive's coordinated abduction. All this because he wanted one sandwich that was unnecessarily forbidden to him. Krabby Road. Krabby Road opens with Plankton already behind bars, labeled by police as Bikini Bottom's most dangerous criminal. But this isn't where the story ends, it's where the real manipulation begins. He escapes using a stolen mustache as camouflage, immediately establishing his willingness to commit theft and deception to achieve his goals, although, we already knew that. Karen kicks him out of his own restaurant, leaving Plankton desperate and vulnerable. This is when he overhears SpongeBob singing a censored song about the Krabby Patty formula, and the criminal opportunity becomes clear. He deliberately exploits SpongeBob's innocent assumption that he wants to start a band. Plankton recruits Patrick and Squidward, forming what he brazenly names Plankton and the Patty Stealers. The name itself is a confession of criminal intent, yet SpongeBob and Patrick remain totally oblivious. Plankton is counting on their trust and naivete to carry out his plan. But then Plankton brings sophisticated equipment into the garage, a machine with headphones designed to extract information directly from SpongeBob's mind, using technology to bypass consent and steal personal information. SpongeBob willingly puts on the headphones, unaware of what he's being subjected to. When the machine fails, Plankton doesn't give up. He arranges for the band's first performance at the Krusty Krab during off hours, the perfect cover for breaking and entering. He's orchestrated every detail to ensure minimal witnesses and maximum access to his target. The moment the performance begins, Plankton abandons his accomplices and attempts the theft. He's used 3 innocent people as unwitting accessories, manipulating their dreams of musical success to help his own criminal enterprise. When police surround him, all 4 band members end up imprisoned for 22 years. That's like an entire eternity in Bikini Bottom. The Krabby Patty that ate Bikini Bottom. In the Krabby Patty that ate Bikini Bottom, Mr. Krabs starts his weekend like any greedy crustacean would, dragging a magnet across the ocean floor hunting for spare change. But this particular Saturday takes a sinister turn when he discovers Sandy's experimental growth formula and decides to test it on a Krabby Patty. Well, the formula works too well. The Krabby Patty begins expanding, growing larger and larger until it reaches monstrous proportions, threatening public safety, especially since it develops an appetite that matches its humongous size. The creature begins consuming everything in its path, including buildings, homes, and residents themselves. The monster devours basically anybody who can't escape its reach fast enough. Patrick wakes up thinking he's had a nightmare about being chased by a giant Krabby Patty, only to discover the horror is very real when SpongeBob's pineapple house gets consumed, forcing him and Patrick to run for their lives. Sandy becomes the last hope for salvation, hiding in her tree dome while the chaos unfolds outside. She works frantically with a puzzle cube to find a solution. The answer involves SpongeBob making direct contact with the monster, using his absorbent properties to literally absorb the giant patty into his own body. The plan works-ish. SpongeBob successfully contains the threat by taking the entire monster's creation into himself, transforming his own appearance in the process. The town returns to normal, but the damage has been done. Buildings destroyed, lives disrupted, and an entire community terrorized by what should have been just another day at the Krusty Krab. So the real crime is greed. The Krabby Chronicle. In the Krabby Chronicle, Mr. Krabs discovers just how much money tabloid newspapers make from sensationalized stories. His restaurant advertising in the boring Bikini Bottom Examiner brings 0 customers, but everyone's buying the bottom feeder because it has wild, fabricated headlines. Krabs sees dollar signs and decides to launch his own newspaper operation, installing a printing press right in the Krusty Krab kitchen. SpongeBob gets assigned as both reporter and photographer for this new venture, the Krabby Chronicle. At first, he writes honest stories about mundane events like Patrick standing next to a bus stop pole. But the paper flops immediately because nobody wants to read about reality. Krabs pressures SpongeBob to use his imagination, which is code for lie. SpongeBob writes that Patrick married the pole, which obviously sells better than the truth, but convinces Krabs that they need more outrageous stories, pushing SpongeBob to destroy people's lives with false reporting. Mrs. Puff becomes the first major victim after SpongeBob sees her car parked next to a police vehicle. He fabricates a high-speed chase story that forces her driving school out of business. Her entire livelihood evaporates based on a complete lie. Larry the Lobster is the next target as SpongeBob claims Larry got beaten up badly, leading the gym to immediately revoke Larry's membership because they can't have weak members. Plankton's already struggling chum bucket is shut down after SpongeBob publishes false claims about the ingredients. Sandy loses her prestigious science award after SpongeBob writes that she's actually stupid. Reputations are destroyed left and right. SpongeBob finally rebels and writes the truth about Krabs, forcing him to create false stories while paying him practically nothing, inciting a riot at the Krusty Krab with residents demanding their money back for being deceived. They take every dollar Krabs made from the newspaper operation, but Krabs doesn't learn his lesson. As the angry crowd leaves, he pulls out his last remaining dollar and stares at his printing press, realizing he could use a machine for counterfeiting currency. Yep, he's ready to commit federal-level financial crimes after his libel operation collapses. Level 5. Just one bite. SpongeBob's relentless campaign to force Squidward into eating a Krabby Patty in just one bite starts innocently enough, but it basically turns into stalking and harassment. SpongeBob follows Squidward everywhere, badgering him at work, appearing uninvited at his home, and refusing to accept repeated rejections until he gets what he wants. It's basically intimidation and stalking. When Squidward finally caves and takes that first bite, something darker awakens. He's addicted. So addicted that he becomes a thief. First, he attempts to steal a customer's order by claiming they left, then he resorts to dumpster diving. But that's nothing. When night falls, Squidward breaks into the Krusty Krab, determined to storm the vault and eat all of the burgers. But Mr. Krabs has prepared something to prevent exactly this. A deleted scene reveals Krabs installed what he calls a security system, a bucket positioned to dump gasoline on intruders followed by a method of ignition. When Squidward triggers this trap, he mistakes the gasoline for water and gets doused twice, with flames erupting both times. The second explosion occurs after he's already been burned, making it clear this system is really designed just to cause serious bodily harm. Krabs has essentially rigged his restaurant with an incendiary device that activates without warning, creating a weapon that could easily prove fatal in the right or wrong hands. The episode ends with Squidward gorging himself on stolen Krabby Patties until his body swells, requiring emergency medical intervention. Because he's literally just ahead. Sponge-Cano. Sponge-Cano opens with Squidward's ordinary day spiraling into chaos when SpongeBob's gratitude song causes a plumbing disaster in his basement. Squidward storms off to work, declaring himself the most miserable person in Bikini Bottom. He has no idea. Mount Bikini Bottom erupts without warning, raining molten lava through the Krusty Krab's roof. Suddenly, the townspeople flee in terror as their civilization crumbles around them. Mr. Krabs, desperate, attempts to extract the life essence from SpongeBob and Squidward to ensure his own survival. Illegal. But then an ancient dolphin warrior emerges from the flames, a survivor of a previous volcanic extinction event, warning that the volcano demands a human offering. The townspeople don't hesitate, they immediately begin hunting for their victim. Squidward's earlier complaint about being miserable becomes his death sentence. They assume he has nothing to live for, so the mob bind him with ropes and carry him toward the lava pit. No consent needed. They hoist him above the molten rock, preparing to drop him to his demise when he screams for mercy. SpongeBob intervenes, saving Squidward from incineration, but the townspeople show no remorse for their attempted elimination of an innocent neighbor. The Dolphin Warrior's final revelation that he meant to sacrifice the house, not the person, finally exposes the community's bloodthirsty rush to judgment. They nearly ended someone's life based on incomplete information. None of them feel even slightly guilty about that. Jellyfish Jam. SpongeBob's decision to bring home a wild jellyfish from jellyfish fields and jellyfish jam is only the first step in the chaos of the episode. SpongeBob begins hosting what can only be described as an illegal rave operation. The jellyfish and SpongeBob dance to pounding techno music for 12 straight hours, creating enough noise pollution to violate every law in Bikini Bottom. As things spiral, SpongeBob attempts to control his pet by restraining it with a leash, but the jellyfish has already made contact with criminal associates outside. During the night, while SpongeBob sleeps, the jellyfish orchestrates a massive break-in, allowing hundreds of wild jellyfish to infiltrate the property. By morning, SpongeBob's house has become the epicenter of an out-of-control party that's been raging for 18 continuous hours. When SpongeBob discovers the invasion, he's lost all control. The jellyfish have essentially taken his home hostage, refusing to leave and actively preventing him from shutting down their operation. Squidward, driven to desperation by the relentless noise, attempts to intervene by playing his clarinet, triggering a coordinated attack where the jellyfish swarm, delivering multiple stings that leave him and his clarinet physically harmed. At a loss, SpongeBob tries to remove the sound equipment. The jellyfish collectively overpower him, yanking the CD player away and destroying it in a fit of rage. They then turn on SpongeBob himself, delivering a brutal stinging attack that forces him to flee to his own roof, where the jellyfish have effectively seized control of the premises through intimidation and violence, creating a dangerous situation that requires intervention from outside authorities to resolve. The lesson here is, stay away from raves. Karate Island. In Karate Island, SpongeBob receives a videotape in the mail claiming he's won an all-expense-paid trip to Karate Island to be crowned King of Karate. The unsolicited invitation comes out of nowhere, hitting all the classic markers of a fraud scheme targeting vulnerable individuals. Sandy immediately questions why SpongeBob would receive this honor when her karate skills clearly surpass his, but SpongeBob's ego blinds him to the obvious red flags. The pair arrive at what they believe is Karate Island, where they meet Master Udon, who immediately begins the psychological manipulation, showering SpongeBob with excessive praise and positioning him as royalty. He stages fake fights with his accomplices, who deliberately lose to SpongeBob to reinforce the illusion. These aren't real martial arts demonstrations, but carefully orchestrated performances designed to build SpongeBob's confidence and lower his guard. Udon places SpongeBob on a throne while relegating Sandy to a simple chair, creating a hierarchy that feeds SpongeBob's vanity, isolating their target from his more skeptical companion. Sandy's growing frustration leads her to storm off, exactly what the criminals planned. The moment she leaves, metal cuffs snap around SpongeBob's wrists, trapping him to the throne. The trap is set. Master Udon drops his facade entirely, revealing the elaborate con. The island isn't Karate Island at all, it's Condo Island, and the entire setup exists solely to pressure victims into purchasing timeshare real estate. SpongeBob finds himself held against his will until he signs a contract to buy property. That's false imprisonment combined with fraud, as Udon uses physical restraint to coerce a financial transaction under false pretenses. Sandy must now fight her way through the 4 floors of fear to reach the tower's top, each floor containing one of Udon's criminal associates, creating a gauntlet designed to prevent rescue attempts. When Sandy finally confronts Master Udon, he reveals his true muscular form beneath his robes, prepared to use physical force to maintain his criminal enterprise. Of course, Sandy defeats Udon, who falls from his tower into the water below, though he survives to make a final real estate pitch. That's just good business. Level 6. Bubble Troubles. Bubble Troubles quickly escalates into a pattern of reckless endangerment that nearly ends in someone's death. SpongeBob and Patrick begin their day with regular bubbles, but boredom drives them to spice up their activity with hot sauce. Those hot sauce bubbles pop directly into their eyes, causing them to burn and make hissing sounds as their eyes literally disintegrate and regrow. They laugh it off and continue to blast each other with these acid bubbles. But Squidward, meticulously crafting a bonsai portrait of himself, gets distracted by their screaming and accidentally decapitates his 20-year creation. However, the real violence is just beginning. SpongeBob blows a massive hot sauce bubble that detonates near Squidward, burning him to ashes and leaving him crippled. Yikes. Oh well. They visit Sandy, who's outside her tree dome repairing a critical oxygen tank that keeps her alive underwater, but Patrick dismisses her as stupid for needing air. SpongeBob decides to help by blowing hot sauce bubbles directly at the oxygen tank, which melt through the equipment, destroying Sandy's entire air supply and essentially guaranteeing her death. Water floods the tree dome instantly, leaving Sandy with only minutes of oxygen left in her suit. Now she's trapped underwater with a rapidly depleting oxygen supply and a sponge who seems to want her dead. The lack of air makes Sandy delirious. She starts hallucinating, licking Patrick, and seeing atoms. SpongeBob, oblivious to the severity, lets Sandy drive while she's literally suffocating. She crashes the submarine through the Krusty Krab roof. Realizing what they've done, SpongeBob and Patrick scramble to find air sources, but the delirious Sandy removes her helmet and smashes it, eliminating her last protection and turning her blue. They force Pearl to share her air supply with Sandy until SpongeBob finally uses an oxygen tank to reach the surface, the very solution that was available all along. Sandy is fine. Squidward, maybe okay? Creepaway Camp. Creepaway Camp starts with a simple invitation letter sent from a mysterious figure lurking in the woods near the old camp. When SpongeBob and his friends arrive at the now dilapidated Camp Coral for their reunion, they find the camp's name has deteriorated to just Caca on the broken sign, which Patrick finds amusing. It's not. The perpetrator has thought this through carefully. Every escape route is eliminated, the bus destroyed, the bridge blown up, the tunnel blocked, even the helicopter crashed. Nobody leaves until the mysterious stalker is finished with them. It's methodical entrapment designed to keep everyone exactly where they need to be for what comes next. The disappearances follow a pattern that becomes more disturbing as it unfolds. First, Mr. Krabs vanishes while treasure hunting, pulled directly into his old treasure chest. Upturn and Rhea get dragged through furniture, a couch and clock somehow becoming portals for the predator. The perpetrator has clearly modified the camp extensively, creating these hidden passages and trap systems throughout the entire facility. Nurse Helga disappears next, followed by Kevin during a failed zipline attempt. Bubble Bass gets taken while showering, experiencing something brushing against his back before losing consciousness. Even the volleyball court becomes another hunting ground. Each time a ball goes out of bounds, another jock vanishes. The predator is watching, waiting for these isolated moments to strike. Mrs. Puff, Plankton, and Karen all disappear while separated from the main group. Anyone who strays alone becomes the next target. The real twist comes when the camp creeper is revealed to be Elwood, a character known for his social dysfunction and repetitive exclamation of, "This is fun." He's been luring former campers back to terrorize them, using their childhood memories as bait. The ultimate goal wasn't to end their lives, but to manipulate them, trapping everyone in a clam-shaped theater for his own entertainment. Sandy eventually reports Elwood to authorities for the kidnapping scheme and frames him for burning down the camp. Ghoul Fools. In Ghoul Fools, SpongeBob and Patrick stumble upon a haunted houseboat that crashes near them, and their first instinct is obviously to break in. Patrick dismisses it as fake, but they're already committing their first violation, trespassing on private property without permission. They come aboard, force entry through the door, and begin exploring rooms that don't belong to them. The ghost captain, Lord Poltergeist, discovers these intruders rifling through his belongings, touching his possessions, and treating his home like a tourist attraction. But the ghost doesn't call the authorities. He escalates the situation, threatening to enslave their souls in eternal torment, and then follows through by literally stealing their souls and trapping them in glass bottles. He's essentially kidnapping their life essence and holding it hostage until they complete his demands, becoming his unwilling servants under threat of permanent soul imprisonment. Then Mr. Krabs gets involved. He immediately steals a head gasket from Frank's car right in broad daylight, then organizes a heist to rob the ghost ship for all of its treasure. Mr. Krabs begins stuffing doubloons into sacks while distributing them to his accomplices, taking a lot more than a few coins. Lord Poltergeist retaliates by trapping 3 of them in the Void, a dimension where he subjects them to psychological torment designed to break their minds. Mr. Krabs faces a nightmare where he must pay to use bathroom facilities, Patrick is stalked by a shape-shifting entity that won't leave him alone, and Squidward confronts a giant demonic version of SpongeBob, all horrific scenarios designed to destroy them from the inside. SpongeBob eventually calls the Flying Dutchman to report stolen property, revealing that Lord Poltergeist and his crew are themselves thieves who stole the Flying Dutchman's treasure and crew members centuries ago. The Ghost Captain has been operating a criminal enterprise for hundreds of years, and when confronted, he attempts to flee rather than face justice. The Flying Dutchman transforms into a missile and destroys the entire ship, cursing everyone aboard to spend eternity in the void. Level 7. Delivery of Doom. SpongeBob receives what appears to be an ordinary delivery request, but the organization behind it, Evil, immediately signals that something criminal is about to unfold. In Delivery of Doom, the criminal syndicate specifically challenges SpongeBob to complete their package transport to a secret underground lair within a 10-minute deadline, suggesting an urgency that legitimate businesses wouldn't require. This is some kind of illegal operation for sure. Evil operates as an organized criminal enterprise, maintaining a hidden headquarters that serves as their base of operations. Their recruitment methods involve formal auditions for new criminal members, demonstrating a pretty structured hierarchy. The fact that they specifically target SpongeBob, known for his naivete and compliance, suggests they target vulnerable individuals to carry out their criminal activities. The package itself becomes the focal point of multiple crimes. SpongeBob unknowingly becomes an accessory to whatever illegal contents the mysterious delivery contains. The secrecy surrounding the package's contents, combined with the underground delivery location, suggests contraband trafficking or other illegal materials being transported across Bikini Bottom. SpongeBob's unwitting participation makes him liable for conspiracy charges even without knowledge of the contents. The 10-minute deadline creates additional pressure, forcing SpongeBob to potentially violate traffic laws, safety regulations, and other laws to meet the unrealistic time frame. The time manipulation tactic is commonly used by criminal organizations to prevent couriers from examining packages too closely or reporting suspicious activities to authorities. The rush time frame prevents proper documentation or witnesses, creating the perfect conditions for illegal transactions. Even Evil's secret lair location compounds the criminal violations, as operating from hidden facilities typically indicates tax evasion, zoning violations, and conspiracy to conceal illegal activities from law enforcement. All of which is true. Their focus is on the crimes, not the law. Survival of the Idiots. Survival of the Idiots opens with SpongeBob and Patrick approaching Sandy's tree dome, only to find it sealed with metal walls and a "Keep Out" sign clearly posted on the door. Despite this very clear warning, they immediately enter without permission, committing their first act of breaking and entering. Inside, they discover Sandy's pre-recorded message explaining hibernation and specifically telling SpongeBob not to disturb her. Patrick dismisses this direct warning by declaring "no means yes, I don't even know where to start with that one," and draining the water from the entrance chamber. What follows is a campaign of harassment against their sleeping victim. They find Sandy in a vulnerable state, hibernating in an enlarged form while sleep-talking about capturing outlaws named Dirty Dan and Pinhead Larry. Rather than leaving immediately, they decide to exploit her defenseless condition for entertainment. They begin talking directly to her, pretending to be the criminals from her dreams. When she responds in her sleep, they escalate their behavior, finding her distress amusing. But then Sandy wakes up, towering over them menacingly before falling back asleep. Any reasonable person would flee at this point. Instead, SpongeBob and Patrick fashion makeshift earmuffs from belly button lint and place them on Sandy's head, their physical contact crossing another boundary. They venture outside and begin an elaborate role-playing scenario, fighting over who gets to be Dirty Dan while creating massive disturbances with snow cannons and weapons. The noise is so excessive that it shakes the entire tree structure, causing Sandy's protective earmuffs to fall off. She awakens in a rage, literally tearing off Patrick's head and pursuing them both in a violent rampage. After Sandy falls asleep again, they discover they're trapped when the door freezes shut. Facing a winter of confinement, they commit their most disturbing act yet, stripping Sandy of her fur using duct tape while she sleeps, essentially skinning their friend to create makeshift clothing. When spring arrives and Sandy wakes up to find herself completely bald, she immediately understands what happened and seeks her own revenge, forcing them to serve as her living furniture while she enjoys lemonade. The Bad Guy Club for Villains. In The Bad Guy Club for Villains, SpongeBob and Patrick discover a lost VHS tape featuring their heroes Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy. The episode begins at Patrick's house, where the duo excitedly insert the tape into Patrick's VCR, but then it all goes wrong. The tape shows Mermaid Man observing the dirty bubble at a bus stop, heading to Bikini Bottom with clearly sinister intentions. But the dirty bubble meets with other notorious criminals: Man Ray, Jumbo Shrimp, Atomic Flounder, and the Sinister Slug, a coalition of Bikini Bottom's most wanted offenders, each with their own history of wrongdoing. The villains converge at Hotel Evil, a location specifically designed for illicit meetings. The Dirty Bubble welcomes them to the BGATFBC, distributing membership cards with the meeting details. Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, witnessing this congregation of wrongdoers, realize they're vastly outnumbered by this criminal syndicate. What makes this episode particularly unsettling is how it parallels real criminal organizations. Like Plankton's numerous attempts to eliminate competition through unlawful means, these villains operate with calculated precision. The atomic flounder, for instance, possesses nuclear touch, a power that causes horrific bodily mutations when used on victims. When Barnacle Boy falls prey to this power, he grows an extra arm with its own face that takes control of his body. But in a shocking twist, the BGATFBC turns out to stand for Bad Guys All Together for Book Club. It doesn't downplay their harmful activities, it just reminds us how normalized their criminal behavior has become. Bikini Bottom is so full of crime that the criminals are just normal now. If you still want more disturbing stuff from Bikini Bottom, don't forget to check out this video on the most disturbing deleted SpongeBob content.